good morning, afternoon, or evening, and welcome to the Bloody Disgusting Network. The following show is just horrifying. Beware.
Sheriff, you're not cheating on your wife if you eat my lemon square.
Your lemon squares taste like ass.
And welcome back to Horror Queers. We're talking shitty basis. We're talking mermaid tail pics. And we're talking the 1980s disco Poland version of Christina Aguilera and Cher's iconic musical flop, Burlesque. And I'm Joe.
And I'm Trace, and we're talking Trito już, trito już, trito już.
Really? We're bringing the Polish into it so early?
It's literally a phrase that is repeated ad nauseum for, I want to say, 2 minutes of this movie.
Look, I'm terrified. I don't like it when we do the foreign films that require me to basically expose the fact that I cannot do foreign-sounding names or places. Polish? Fuck.
Yeah, I don't know it very well. But everyone, we are discussing Agnieszka's Szmoczyńska's The Lure. And
yes.
I mean, whoa.
We are so late to this party. I feel like everybody else has covered this, and I'm excited. This was the first time watch for me.
This was a third time watch for me. I definitely saw it at its screening at Fantastic Fest, and then I watched it with my husband and former guest of the show, Jenny Nolf, and my husband fucking hated this movie with a fiery passion. Oh, he hates this movie.
Really?
But we also watched it at a Halloween party, so like the setting was not good to watch a movie like this.
Yeah.
But no, there are so many things to discuss in this shockingly 90-minute movie. So Joe, but why don't we bring someone in to talk about this? Because fuck it, we need it. All right, everyone. She is a content editor and staff writer at Film Cred, with additional bylines at sites like Slash Film and Dread Central. She is also the owner and founder of the horror blog We Who Walk Here. Please welcome Jessica Scott.
Hello, I'm so excited to be here, so excited to talk about The Lure.
Yes.
Welcome. Well, Jessica, why are you excited to talk about The Lure? Enlighten us.
Well, you don't see many Polish disco killer mermaid musicals, so I'm super jazzed about that. No, because I was late to the party on this movie too. I had heard so many people talking about how great it was. I only watched it for the first time earlier this year, and I was like, everyone was right. I was missing out on killer disco mermaids. Why was this not in my life earlier? So yeah, I'm very excited to talk about it.
Yeah, that's how it was for me too. I remember the program at Fantastic Fest. It's just like, yeah, Polish horror mermaid musical, and I was like, well, I like
what?
I mean, I don't know if I like Polish. I don't have a lot of experience with Polish, but like, I like the other stuff. So yeah, let's try this. And I was telling Joe this last night. It is a movie that I don't find myself particularly entertained by while I'm watching it. I'm not bored, but I'm fascinated by every second of this movie as it crosses my eyes.
Exactly. Like, it's not a feel-good film. It's not a comfort watch. I'm sure it's a comfort watch for somebody, because everything's a comfort watch for somebody.
Right.
But it's just so fascinating. You're just enthralled the whole time, even when you're not sure what's happening. Or there are times that confuse me, but I enjoyed the confusion.
It's a vibe, right?
Yes.
Well, it also feels like a collage of genres and interests that don't necessarily intersect regularly, or maybe shouldn't be complementary. So when you're like, oh, it's 1980s and Poland and mermaids and musical, you're just like, wait, are we doing a Mad Libs game? No one should be trying this. It should not work. And yet, yeah, there's something super captivating about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think we're going to try to figure out what that one thing is. What is the one thing about this movie that is so captivating?
Only one, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we go into this? Because I feel like we have a lot to unpack with the plot itself, and The production is, I think, pretty interesting. No trouble here, luckily. This seemed to be I don't know, they just said, let's make this movie, and they got to make it, which, God, that sounds awesome.
Wait, no Weinsteins anywhere in sight? I'm
no
shocked.
Weinsteins. Okay, and I will say that most of this, or I'm sorry, all of this, is from the Criterion Blu-ray's 40-minute making of featurette that is on this Blu-ray. So,
Nice.
here we go. So yes, director Agnieszka Smoczynska spent most of her childhood in the restaurant her mom worked at, up until she was about the age of 12. And it was a restaurant that had a dance floor, so I don't know what you would call that. It's just like it's not a club, but it is a restaurant, but that's it.
Mm-hmm.
Because of this, she was exposed to more adult content at an early age than most of us probably were. While in film school, she met screenwriter Robert Bolesto, and they collaborated on Smoczynska's short films. And one day he messaged her saying he wanted to make a film with her, and he already had the title. And this title was The Daughters of Disco.
Oh, okay.
So he had two friends who grew up in dance clubs. And so again, we have Smoczynska, who's like raised in a restaurant, and then these other two singers who were raised in a club. They have many wild stories about what it was like to grow up there. And he was like, well, we have to tell your story. And because Smoczynska grew up in that restaurant environment, he was like, ooh, she's the perfect one to collaborate with on this. The two friends that Bolesto had were Basia and Zuzanna Rowińska. They comprise the Polish pop band Ballady I Romansa, which is basically just ballads and romance in English. When Bolesto approached them about making a film about them, Basia said no. She felt that it was too personal.
No.
Like it was,
It's a no.
she didn't want a biopic made about them. She was like, that is too that's encroaching on some dangerous territory for us. So he was like, okay, well, I still want to make this movie, but I still want to make it about you, but I can't make it about you.
What can we do? What can we do?
Mermaids.
Yes!
The obvious choice.
It hit him. He's like, one day, he just said, mermaids. I've got it. I
just
did it.
woke up one day and I was like, you know what? Mermaids.
So once he brought this idea to the sisters, Basia was okay with this. So the title switched from The Daughters of Disco to The Lure. And of course, to give the Rowinskas a stamp on the film, they are going to be doing the music for it as well.
Nice. Okay.
In the early stages, Smoczynska and Bolesto knew that they wanted to show audiences a world that a child would experience in a dance club environment, and to include things like spying on people having sex in bathrooms, having your first cigarette, having your first alcoholic beverage, things like that we do see in this film. The film would act as a way to depict a personal transformation, the loss of your world and previous identity as you emerge into this new, unexplored one.
Wait, so are you saying a part of your world?
I intentionally left out any reference to The Little Mermaid, but yes, I mean, this is a loose adaptation of Hans Christian Andersen's Little Mermaid with tidbits of Homer's Odyssey thrown in there.
You betcha.
I mean, as of course everyone doesn't know, Disney liked to I'll use the phrase water down their fairy tales. The original Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale obviously is very dark and very upsetting, and pretty much has our mermaid die by suicide by choosing not to murder an asshole prince. Anyway, so they wanted to set this in the 80s because this was a story being told from their point of view, children of the 80s. And when I say the 80s, I don't just mean like, oh, like fun 80s that we know in America. This is communist Poland in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
And the perspective of people that were children at the time is not often done, really, in film or anything. So when older Polish people actually critiqued the lore for not being a realistic portrayal of the era, especially since in reality, that era of Poland was drab, had a very gray aesthetic, so there wasn't a lot of color.
Yeah, just a little grim, right?
A little bit, but Bolesto's defense was always that this was told from a child's perspective, and what does a child see but a world full of color? When it came to the influences on the film, oh, Joe, this is for you, by the way.
Ooh.
Bolesto said he incorporated many elements of a 1983 cult film from Poland called Akademia Pana Kleksa, which is based on a series of surreal children's stories and is filled with songs and bizarre imagery. And I kind of looked up some pictures of this. It kind of has a Willy Wonka vibe to it, at least in terms of aesthetic.
Ooh. Okay. I'm
But,
intrigued.
and this is the part that's for you, Joe. Bolesto said he always envisioned The Lure as a cross between that film and David Cronenberg's Crash.
Oh my god. Folks, go and listen to our episode on Crash when we guested on the Windsor Film Club.
Yes. So the musical element. Okay, so this is what I find so fascinating, right? Because normally you have a script, you write it, boom, cool, let's film the script. This did not work that way. They had to write the script in a different way than usual. So Bolesto wrote a treatment, and that treatment was then given to the Rowinska sisters, who began working on the music and lyrics. So they did all the composing first, based just on the story beats that Bolesto had included in his treatment. And then once they did all the compositions, Smoczynska would then build the film around the sounds that she was getting from them. And also involved was sound designer Marcin Lenarczyk, who began working on the overall sound design for the film after Bolesto turned in his first draft of the script. So Lenarczyk had a script solely for the sound that Bolesto then used to write his dialogue.
Oh, wow. So unconventional.
My brain does not work this way, and I don't understand how anyone can do this.
Creatives, they're not just like us.
Oh, God. Well, so another thing, though, is that Poland doesn't really have a history of musicals. So, like for a lot of countries, they have musicals where they're like, oh, yeah, this is an American musical. This is a Russian musical, blah, 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 blah. Poland doesn't have that. There was no tradition of Polish musicals that they could draw inspiration from, so this turned out to be what could have been bad, actually a blessing for them, because what they thought was, well, then we get to define what a Polish musical is.
Right, yeah.
They got to make their own rules. They didn't have to be stuck in an old style of cinema, but in an effort to give the musical a new and some might say revolutionary quality, they looked at 3 different ways you could film a musical. So first way, this is the more traditional way or classical musical where everyone is singing instead of talking. There's dancers everywhere. And the example of this in The Lure is the big mall set piece, I think.
Yes.
Admittedly, this is my favorite type of musical, and so when this film and I'll say even La La Land both have numbers like this to kick off the film, and then they don't dip back into this well later,
Oh, wait.
I find it frustrating.
No, give me what I want.
Yeah. Then there is the second way, and I'm going to call this the cabaret approach, and this is where the only time people sing is when they are performing in the world of the film. So
Right.
you have a lounge singer singing in the dance club in The Lure, or what they did in the cabaret musical was they removed any and all songs from the musical that weren't done in the cabaret. So the only songs people were singing were cabaret numbers.
Right, yeah.
And then the third way, and this was deemed the most poetic way to film a musical, and that is the music video style, in which we see honestly, I think that Tritle number that I was talking about earlier, when we're just kind of having the camera follow around the apartment as we're just looking at all these people passed out from the night before, that's that visual aesthetic for this.
Yeah.
Rather than pick one of these ways,
extra.
they decided to incorporate all of them into The Lure, and the challenge was combining them all into a cohesive whole. So major influences were films like Bob Fosse's All That Jazz and Cabaret, as well as Lars von Trier's Dancer in the Dark.
Oh, Jesus. Okay.
And all I know about that is that that's the movie that like Bjork will never work with him again because of what he did to her on that movie. That's all I know about it.
Yeah, he's terrible.
Yeah.
But that movie is fucking amazing.
It is. It is devastating, but it's so good.
It breaks my soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, maybe one day.
It's like, oh, are you feeling a depressive episode coming on? Let's just ease into that. Yeah,
Lars von Trier, man. Well, okay, so remember, though, it's not just music we're talking about here. We still have to have a story and a script. So in terms of visual language, it was decided that any scripted scenes without singing and only dialogue had to be told as simply as possible. They would film with a handheld camera using up-close shots with the characters, a minimal number of shots, and a minimal number of cuts. In contrast, any time music is happening, the style of filmmaking becomes more complex, experimental, and, for lack of a better term, fun. They also wanted to make a clear divide between the worlds that existed both behind and in front of the curtain. So, the club is a world full of glamour, bright colors, and lights. backstage it's all sorrow, fatigue, and an overall sense of grossness, which is why almost all of the lighting in the behind-the-scenes shots are fluorescent lighting.
Yeah, it's pretty stark.
A little bit. So I think one thing we can all agree about the lore, though, is that it's kind of unclassifiable, right? Like, it's a musical, it's a horror movie, it's a comedy, it's a coming-of-age story, it's a cautionary tale, it's a story about sisterly bonds, it's a story about first love, it's a lot. So Smoczynska and Bolesto are well aware of this, with Smoczynska even saying that the film itself is like the mermaids themselves, a grotesque creation, half beautiful creature and half monster. But the whole time while making this, she said she's aware that the film walks a fine line, bordering both on bad taste and emotional blackmail. It was important to her to keep stretching that line very, very thin so that the audience and the characters would follow, but she didn't want to cross the line while at the same time not playing it too safe. Her reasoning being that the film is about a passage or an initiation, crossing a certain border, and those things are inherently messy, so this film should be as well.
That is fascinating. I don't find anything in this movie to be bad taste.
I thought about this too, and I don't know if you agree, Jessica. I'm assuming maybe it's the fact that we are taking what are typically believed to be cute creatures and making them horrific monsters, even though historically that is how mermaids have been portrayed. It's just not the mainstream idea of what a mermaid is because of Disney.
Yeah, that's probably where she was going with that, but I'm definitely on the side of the film that I like kind of reclaiming, like, no, this is what a mermaid actually is.
Right.
And, you know, don't believe the hype from Disney, you know?
I mean, like, look, I know that we aren't dealing with actual children here, but the emotional maturity of these mermaids is that of preteen girls.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So I wonder, too, if the fact that, like, the subject matter is that it is essentially a sexual tale of preteen girls maybe is delving into bad taste. But to me, that's just like, no, that's just realistic. But, you know, whatever.
It's like, oh, that's just European as well.
Yeah. So moving on to the mermaids themselves, casting... they filmed this movie in 30 days.
What?
Casting took a year and a half.
Yeah, you want to make sure you get this right, because if you don't have the right two women playing these roles, the whole movie doesn't work.
Exactly. So they saw about 2,000 girls, with Marta Mazurek, who plays Silver, being cast first, and Michalina Olshanska, who plays Golden, coming later. They trained, despite the fact that this was a 30-day shoot, the rehearsal period for this was very, very, very long. They trained for several months because they had to not only swim and sing, but they also had to train their bodies to be beasts, not just in appearance, but also deep inside. They had to learn how a creature used to know gravity would walk and move and dance on a world with gravity. They had to get used to being naked, but also with that, they couldn't appear embarrassed or be self-conscious by their nudity, but they also couldn't flaunt it. So in their performances, they had to be utterly devoid of human shame, pride, and awareness. So watching this film, I'm kind of like, I don't ever feel like the film is sexualizing these creatures, but everyone around them is sexualizing them.
Exactly. I think that's the key part that keeps it from going into bad taste, because
Right.
I think they did an amazing job. I would like to know what kind of exercises they did in order to get the human shame out of it. You know what I mean? Like, how do you train for that?
Can we all train for that a little bit?
Oh my God, no kidding.
Well, and I think that's where it becomes like, to me, it's like a childlike innocence, right? Or like, I guess like how, if we're going biblical, like Adam and Eve not knowing that being naked was bad until they were told that being naked was bad. So I don't know. I do get that from these performances, though.
Absolutely. But I watched that documentary earlier today, actually. I had not seen the documentary before, but the first time I saw the movie, I was so struck by how animalistic they are. Even just, you know, their gestures and their eyes. And I wondered if they were dancers because of how they were able to tune into that part of themselves.
Yeah, I almost get like a similar vibe to the dancers who become actors in Climax in Gaspar Noé's film, where it feels like they have a better sense of control over their bodies than traditional actors only do. Continue on, Trace.
No, I know. I'm just thinking, because I mean, like, and that's where, like, again, like, you know, they worked with this really famous Polish choreographer. But it's the thing where it's like, yeah, I think people, when they think choreography, they think, okay, it's just dancing, but it's not that. Like, she was working with them in the pools, all this kind of stuff. So I don't know. I always wonder what kind of like a job description a choreographer is, right? Like what are your lines? Like, I will do this, I won't do that.
Well, right, because they had to learn how to use the tails as well, right?
Well, yeah. So, like, these tails, they were 6 to 7 feet long, and the actresses said 55 pounds in weight, but then Smoczynska said they were 90 pounds in weight.
God.
So whenever the girls had to be moved, so they used pedals, which I think were inside the tail mechanisms to move them around. But whenever they were picked up, it took 3 men to pick up the girls and their tails to move them to the next location.
Those girls are thick.
Yeah, but it is, they are practical effects. I think the only time they use CGI is when they're turning on screen. So, The Lure had its world premiere in Poland on December 16th, 2015, before hitting the festival circuit in 2016, beginning with Sundance in January. And it pretty much spent all of that year screening at festivals before finally getting a limited theatrical North American release on February 1st, 2017. And in a rarity, I think, it became part of the Criterion Collection that same year when they released a Blu-ray of it on October 10th.
Yeah, I remember when we were planning our underrated or underseen series, we heavily debated whether or not to program this. And then we were like, oh my God, this is one of those movies where it's like, do we put it in 2015? Do we put it in 2017? And ultimately we decided to go with another film, knowing that we were going to cover it later on this year. But it's just like, God damn, these films that do these elongated festival process.
I mean, but admittedly, if there's one that's going to have a really long festival run, because it would be The Lure, because again, I could just imagine a bunch of buyers being like, what do I do with this?
What do I even do with this?
But that being said, it got rave reviews from critics. We're looking at 89% on Rotten Tomatoes with an average score of 7.1 out of 10, and Letterboxd users have awarded it a score of 6.8 out of 10. So, I mean, generally speaking, this is a very well-regarded film, but it's also a film that I wouldn't just, like, show people.
I'm kind of shocked by those numbers. I like this movie a lot, but this is not a movie for everyone. I would have thought that this would have been sort of firmly down the middle.
Well, and that's the thing too, right? Because again, when I hear mermaid horror musical,
just list them all. Yeah.
That's why I'm glad that they talked about the different kinds of musicals, right? Because again, when I hear musical, I have a very certain type of movie or a musical in my head. And so, honestly, my first viewing, I liked this film, but it was kind of like, but it wasn't giving me what I wanted because it kept trying a different thing every scene. And it's one that I've kind of warmed more to every time I watch it. But because I think, honestly, you could watch this film 100 times and still not get everything the movie is doing.
Yes.
There's a lot going on in this movie, which is funny because when you read some of the reviews, they say, oh, it's a very simple, straightforward story. You know, like, we've seen this all before. And I'm like, have we?
Where have we seen this before?
I think narratively, it is a simple story, but I say problem, oh my God. It's not a problem, but the crux is there's so many underlying themes and metaphors going on here that it does make it complicated. So I think if you come in and you want just a straightforward story, you can get it. But I think if you don't have those extra underlying things, it doesn't really, it's not a satisfying viewing experience.
Yeah. For example, because I often compare my plot summaries for the episodes to the Wikipedia page to be like, am I doing too much? Am I doing too little? The Wikipedia plot synopsis for this movie is like maybe 3 to 4 paragraphs long. My plot summary initially came in at 4 pages, and then I had to distill it down to 2.5. And I feel like if you're just doing plot, like if you're saying what are the important narrative beats, you could do like, okay, girls take up shop in this club, sing numbers, fall in love with boy, doesn't end well, bad. But like, there's so much more to it than that.
Yes.
Jessica, in general, are you a fan of musicals?
I am. I love
Okay.
musicals. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy about that. No, because I know some people who are like vehemently against musicals. And
of course.
The thing I always say is I'm always like, look, just imagine they're speaking the dialogue. Like that's it is. I mean, if we learn anything from the Buffy musical, it's that a musical is, hey, when someone bursts into song, they are literally singing their feelings. And I feel like for some people, all they hear is singing, but they don't hear the words people are singing.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say that's one of my favorite things about this movie, but there are so many things I love about this movie. But the lyrics are so melancholy and so dark, even though we're having this, disco number where everybody's, it's like a disco burlesque. Yeah, exactly. There's so much discordance in this movie and so many contrasts that it's just so beautiful. When I was watching it, rewatching it, I kept coming back to Phil Spector's Wall of Sound, which I think makes a lot of sense with the way it was produced, the way, the composers and the writer and the sound designer and the director all work together. It feels more like a cinematic wall of sound than almost any other movie I've ever seen. In the way the themes work together and the different departments work together, it's just a different theatrical experience. And I can totally see why people would dislike this movie, because it's not for everybody, but I'm just so fascinated by it.
Well, and what I would say is, though, so if you're a horror fan, like, again, like, all these descriptors have kind of like been like, oh, like, that sounds really interesting, but you are not into musicals, I would actually argue that the fact that this is a foreign film is a benefit for you, because no one understands what they're saying, so you are forced to read the lyrics as if it were dialogue, but you get to listen to music while you're reading it.
And honestly, these songs are on point. Like, not only are a lot of them really catchy, musically speaking, but when you are reading the lyrics of these songs, it's really obvious, oh, okay, this is interior monologues of these characters. It is advancing the plot. It is contributing to the character arcs.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. It just always makes me so mad when people brush off musicals. It's like, no, like, it's so good.
It is.
I get it that they're not for everybody, but it's like, do you understand the form?
I think it really is, though. People, it's that traditional musical that I like. So, people are like, oh, it's Oklahoma. Like, yeah, I get it. It's not like that, but it is like
you,
that.
I like Oklahoma.
I do too.
Well, no, I know. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think that people, like, they have Seven Brothers, like those types of musicals, The Sound of Music, and they're like, oh, God, it's so boring. They just keep singing. It's like, well, listen to what they're singing. Listen to what they're singing, and maybe you'll, like, get it.
And I would think that approaching it from the three different kinds of musicals, like half of this movie just feels like a Fiona Apple video, Like,
oh my God.
There's something for everybody.
Truly. So many different types of musical.
Mm-hmm. But okay, so let's go into this plot, Joe.
Okay. So I'm going to acknowledge that I'm going to draw on a couple of different articles, one by Annette Lepeque called Mythical Puberty and the Discotheque, and another one by Sarah Fonseca called Discover the Flavor of Things Denied to You. So we'll begin with Fonseca because she has a kind of interesting introductory piece that is very helpful. By the way, her piece is from Clio Journal, and it does draw heavily on the queer subtext of this film. So she says, by causing identity crises in men and drawing reverence from women, the mermaid has always had a bit of a reputation for gender and sexual deviance. The mermaid inevitably swam to North America and was appropriated by 1970s lesbian feminist subcultures, which to me is interesting because this movie is set in 1980s, but also if you start to think of the prevalence of mermaids in culture, sometimes they're desexualized, sometimes they are associated with things like the sirens, which we'll see in this movie, but also they're associated with a kind of sexualization, right? So there's a deviance to it, there's a bestiality to it. We talked about this briefly, Trace, just a couple of weeks ago when we talked about Robert Pattinson wanting to fuck that mermaid in The Lighthouse. And if folks are interested in hearing more, I would encourage you to seek out a queer movie that we will cover eventually on the podcast called Blew My Mind, which I love.
Yes, but that's the one, though, where you don't want to look at any image from it because every image is from the end of the movie, right?
Yeah, I mean, you're almost not meant to know it's a mermaid film, but it's like, you know what? It's fine. It's fine. I compare it to Ginger Snaps. It's basically the mermaid version of Ginger Snaps.
Gotcha. Which is just a horror version of Disney's The 13th Year.
Everything is the horror version of something else.
Yeah.
Okay, so with that in mind, that like mermaids are part of a lesbian culture, but also like heavily sexualized and appropriated, let's go into this movie. So we open with animated credits by painter Alexandra Valesco-Zuzka, and the film opens on two mermaids. So we have Silver, who, as you mentioned, Trace, is played by Marta Zarek, and she is the blonde one, by the way, because you would think that Golden would be the blonde-haired one, and it is not. And it confused me for a lot of this movie. And then we also have Golden, who is played by Michalina Olszansky, and she is the brunette, and they are attempting to lure in a father and son. So apparently the father, who I'm going to refer to as percussista, who is played by Andrzej Konopka, percussista is just drummer.
Yes, I was like, it's just drummer, so you can just call him the drummer if you want. That's not a name.
Chris is like, let me make it easy for you. And of course, the more important character is Mietek, the son, and he is played by Jakob Gersal. And basically, the mermaids are lured out of the water because Mietek is drumming, like kind of making music and so on the shore of the beach. And they're like, should we lure him into the water and eat him, or what should we do with them? So they decide, yeah, let's definitely eat these boys. So they try to lure the men into the water, and that only stops when the mother, Chrysia, who is played by Kinga Price, screams. And then we get this title card. So it's very abrupt, almost confronting, like, wait, what is happening? We only know that there are mermaids trying to lure men into the water.
Well, and it's kind of a joke, right? Like, I feel like Chrysia's laugh, because it's interrupting this almost like sexual moment, right, between the mermaids and Mietek. But then it blends into the Donna Summer song that we're about to get to kick off the opening credits. This scene actually was originally longer. There was an extended opening where it's like, Chrysia comes down and she tries to touch the mermaids. And once she touches them and she's like, oh, they're safe. Then we cut to the title. And I don't like that as much.
No. No, I think it's really important that this is giving us just enough information. I'll confess, as a first-time viewer, I didn't even realize that this was the family unit that we're going to watch perform for most of the film. I thought that these were random people, and so when we open on Chrysia singing, Donna Summer's Disco Smash, I Feel Love, I was like, cool, okay, we're transitioning over to a different thing. I didn't even realize that was the same character.
That's why you gotta watch it 100 more times.
Clearly, yeah, or just pay more fucking attention.
Yeah.
In your defense, she changes hair
right?
At least 20 times in this movie.
She looks like someone, because the promotional image that's always used for this movie is the one of her in the sailor outfit with them behind her in their sailor outfits. She looks like, God, she just looks like someone, like an American actress. I can't figure out who it is, but yeah, she changes her hair constantly in this movie.
The wig game is on point.
Although I must say, she, in a few scenes, was giving me Chicken Lady vibes from The Kids in the Hall.
Ooh,
I'm so sorry, but yeah.
Okay, so we do open with this number, so we get almost the entirety of I Feel Love, which is interesting because it is sung in English, but it has that sort of distinctly European vibe. So as a North American audience, it's giving me kind of uncanny feelings. I took a moment to realize this was set in the 1980s, so I don't know, like, this opening sequence is very important for establishing a mood and a tone, but also I think the choice to go with a very familiar American song is a smart one, because we are like, oh, I recognize the song. Oh, it's a musical. Okay, I'm fine.
Well, that's it. That's the only thing you're going to be familiar with.
Enjoy it. It's the last one. Yeah. So we then follow the house manager, who is played by Zygmunt Malowicz. I'm going to mispronounce all these names.
Yeah,
I apologize to any Polish listeners we have. and he investigates an unusual smell. So we follow sort of in gentle tracking shots throughout this club, from the performance area to the bar, to the kitchen, to the back office, as he's like interrogating women about a smell that he just says is unusual, but we don't really know what he means. And we later come to realize, oh, he's smelling a fishy smell. And
Right.
and I have thoughts, and I have a reading about this. But essentially, we get to him stumbling upon Golden and Silver, jumping like children on the couch in the back office, and Chrysia claims that they are her friend's kids.
Do you want to jump into the fishy vagina?
Uh,
Of it all?
I mean, I think it's important that this is established right up front. So obviously, there's been talk about how this film is commentary on immigrant status, but also sex trafficking and the abuse of minors and so on. So, like, I think it's really important that this man, who we don't know much about, but he's running this burlesque club, is immediately presented with two very clearly underage girls who are made to strip naked, who are revealed to have no genitalia beneath the waist. They're described as smooth as Mattel dolls. And then we flick water on them, and suddenly they have these tails that we can also stick a finger into the slit.
I just think it's interesting. Hey.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say this. So I don't think it's an accident that he's walking around interrogating women about this fishy smell, because
No, of course not.
No.
God, this is terrible. Dad, please don't listen to this. When I was growing up, my dad would always, when we had crawfish boils and shrimp boils and crab boils, whenever he would open the shrimp bag, he would always be like, "It smells like bad cooter."
Oh, Jesus Christ.
So, but I feel like that's like a stigma on women. It's like, for this. And so I don't think it's a mistake that we have this lecherous club manager being like, "Smells like fish, must be a woman." I mean, it is in this case, but you know.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it feels like a joke, right?
Yes, very much so.
Absolutely. Like, there's so many jokes about, misogyny and the patriarchy, and this disgusting man interrogating, the women dancing for him, the woman in the kitchen with the low-cut blouse, and everything is really sexualized and emphasized to the nth degree. But yeah, that's absolutely... We're thrown into the grotesquerie right away.
Right.
Where we see how these girls are victimized and objectified, and they're not quite sure what's going on. And yeah, it is absolutely no accident that he's only asking women this question.
Well, and actually too, I mean, I'm going back to the bad taste conversation from earlier, but like, this man fingers their tail slit.
Yeah.
So he is sexually assaulting them. They don't mind because they're so naive. They don't really, they don't care, but they don't like realize that, I guess that's what's happening or something. But we're talking about, going into sex trafficking and like the way that children can be taken advantage of, their innocence can be taken advantage of. That's this right here. And I would think that, if we're talking about bad taste, it's this old man fingering these preteens. These young girls.
Yeah, so Fonseca ends up making that same observation. She says the sequence punks the obsession-repulsion with the vagina by courting the desire for hairlessness, symmetry, and cleanliness to the extreme, and then denying the titillated voyeur entry. So we might have a kind of perverse pleasure in wanting to see, these girls are stripping naked, and it's appropriate because it's a burlesque club, and they're sort of consenting because they don't seem to be protesting. But the confrontation of seeing, they literally have nothing going on beneath the waist is a very arresting image. And then, of course, we get the visual payoff with seeing these ginormous tails. And then we have to watch him finger the slit, which are just like, oh, fuck off. Okay.
Yeah. And well, also, I know we said no genitalia, but their ass also doesn't have a crack to it.
Right. Yeah. Which is interesting, right? Because, like, a lot of these effects are practical. So, as you said, there's minimal CGI here. And I guess I applaud the fact that this could all look terrible because we do see these girls naked very frequently. And the fact that it looks seamless and like it's doing exactly what it needs to do without being like, they just CGI'd her crotch or something like that. I just think it's really, really well done.
Mm-hmm. And we talked about the girls going through training to get rid of their inhibitions and, you know, not be ashamed but not flaunt their sexuality at all. I think it's so important and so impressive that the camera takes the same objective view, because we never eroticize the girls from our viewpoint, from the camera's viewpoint. We see these loathsome characters doing that, but the camera is very much standoffish in terms of that kind of depiction, which I appreciate.
Is there any, I mean, do y'all view any of these human characters as redeemable or good people?
This is such a good for her fucking movie where you're just like, I want these mermaids to eat every character.
Exactly, exactly. I would be fine with just a mermaid massacre at the end. Yeah, just eat the entire wedding party is my vote.
Yeah, that would have been really good.
Yeah.
I will confess, I find a lot of complicated, sort of interesting dynamics with Chrysia, particularly as we move into the film, and she starts to become more uncomfortable with the girls and she's having weird dreams. But man, oh boy, was I satisfied with what happens to Mietek, because that dude fucking sucks.
Yes.
I have complicated thoughts about that. I agree, agree, but I'm also of the mindset where I'm like, yeah, but he's like an early 20s kid. Like, of course he's gonna fuck around. And he does tell her up front, you're always gonna be a fish to me, and that's it, God. So don't get attached.
Yes, but fuck him.
No, for sure. For sure.
All right, so following a burlesque performance of the Banana Song, we see Golden and Silver have become sick. And I'll confess, I didn't always understand how frequently they need to be in the water versus they can be out of the water and so on. There's a couple of just little details about the mermaid pathology I would have liked a bit more clarification on.
Well, because this is the only time they have this issue. I was also concerned about the chlorine in the pool, to be honest.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but they are tossed in the pool to recover. We get to see some glorious sort of slow motion underwater shots as they recover, and it's really beautiful. And the optimist in me thought, maybe they're going to be fine. What a dumb
I mean, Golden's gonna be fine.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the more cynical person does well in this movie. How bad is that?
It's life accurate.
Exactly.
So this, terrible / great house manager, I guess, he seems to understand that he has an opportunity, so he puts them to work as strippers and backup singers.
Yeah, their tits are out this entire time. No seashell bras in this movie.
So this is when we transition over to the first really big kind of conventional musical number, as you mentioned, Trace. So we head to the department store so that they can pick up supplies. We're also getting a tour around the city. And this number is great. It feels extravagant. We've got what seems to be at least 50 to 100 extras dancing around. It's just really joyous.
Like we get this huge crane shot as it descends upon this I mean, full disclosure, this is actually my favorite set piece in the film, which doesn't mean I don't like everything else like a lot less, but like again, because this is the type of musical aesthetic that I gravitate towards, this was my favorite set piece in the film. Also, the lyrics, they're saying the city will tell us what it is we lack. We want things to be clear. Hands made filthy by dirty deeds. Can't stand to watch it go to seed. So even though they're like, oh yeah, the city's going to tell us what we should do because we're foreigners here.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, so this all culminates when Silver faints, and then she is aided by Mietek, and so begins a flirtatious relationship, which Golden later warns her telepathically.
Yes.
Please do not fall in love.
I love the telepathy. This is, and because we get like the kind of like aquarium sounds as they do it. It reminds me of Free Willy.
The sound design in this movie is great, particularly when we're dealing with sort of aquatic sea creature kind of whale sounds. It's like, yeah, okay, you did this. You did it well.
Yeah, it's the perfect combination of kind of beautiful but kind of terrifying at the same time, because it's a really creepy, like, clicking sound at times.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds like a predator, like, slowly approaching you, but it also has that kind of ethereal quality. It's a great another contrast that just works perfectly.
Yeah, you can very quickly understand that they are both like sexy and dangerous.
But that's even these tails, which I know we've already talked about the tails a little bit, but like they are gross looking. They are slimy, mucousy. They're peeling and bleeding very frequently. Which again, that to me is like, yeah, we're doing female puberty here. Like this is like your first period.
Yeah. But there's also something otherworldly and gorgeous. And I'm not going to lie, I think one of the things that stands out about this movie is the fucking size of these tails. Like, I'm so used to seeing, oh, the tails are just supplementary legs. They're the exact same size. These tails are not. These tails are ginormous. And I love this idea that they grow. Like, it's almost a mutation, which makes it feel more otherworldly, but also, I don't know, extravagant and sensational.
That's the other thing, too. It's body horror.
It kind of is, yeah. But I don't find this as off-putting as I do with a lot of other variations of this.
Well, I think it would be different if it was a human that is turning into a mermaid. Just that they're already mermaids. There's no horror for them because that's just what they do.
That and the fact that I think they're not ashamed of it, right? Like when they see people observing and applauding and they're fascinated by their tails, they themselves seem like, oh yeah, cool. Like, dig my tail. Fuck my tail. Do what you want with it because we're here for it.
I think that's another thing, especially with as many male characters kind of objectify them. There have been a few critics I wrote talking about how phallic these tails are and the size being, like, I think that's very intimidating to the men on purpose from the movie's perspective.
Right, yeah.
Oh, I have performance anxiety. Your tail's too big.
Right.
That's fascinating. I never thought about that.
I didn't think about that either, but that's great.
Okay, so it's time for their burlesque debut. So, yes, I had it down as a flight crew, but maybe it's a sailor outfit. It was giving me heavy Kylie Minogue vibes as we, like, strut onto the scene. We see Chrissia singing. She's frequently breaking the fourth wall, which I thought was another interesting creative choice because she'll sing directly to the camera, which either means that the camera is a voyeur or like a participant in this show, or we're saying like there's a breaking down of the kind of cinematic walls, like we're not really watching reality anymore, which I think both of them work for this movie.
I will say too, so right before this, when they're all going out, the manager of the place like gives them all a knee in the ass on the way out.
Oh my god, what was that?
I clearly whatever ritual he has to excuse himself for touching people, but it's a thing where it's like Silver goes into it. It's like, yeah, sure, do it, but Golden's like, don't touch me.
Do not. She literally is like, don't even try it.
Yeah, I fell in love with her when she jumped out of the water at the semi jump scare where Silver is so innocent and she's so feral coming out of the water in that first scene. But when she was like, no, don't fucking touch me, that's when I was like, that is my girl right there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. She will be fine. But it sucks, right, though? Because, like, I respect her for letting Silver do what she wants. Like, she doesn't say, but she says, like, you know, just so you know, like, if you do this, you're going to turn into sea foam. But she's not saying you can't fucking do this because you will turn into sea foam.
Right. Yeah, we only get one real fight between the two of them, and even that doesn't feel as significant as the conflict with other people.
But I think that's such an interesting because they don't have parents that we know of in this movie. So in a way, Golden is the closest thing Silver has to a parent.
True.
But yeah, I love this openness about, no, we have to let children explore the world on their own, make their own mistakes, and suffer the consequences. Like, that to me is one of the best messages I get out of this movie.
Ooh, I don't know. It makes me feel uncomfortable. I don't think we should be sexualizing children.
God.
Oh my god. All right, so this show goes over like gangbusters, and the crowd is loving these tales. So at the end of the number, Silver kisses Mietek, and Golden looks absolutely disgusted. I love that she's like, fine, do you, but this guy? Okay.
Well, and then she sings this super sad song about how lonely she is, and then projects that into the world and says, but everyone's lonely.
True, but in between, we do get the introduction of Triton, who is played by Marcin Kowalczyk. And I thought that his makeup design was really interesting. Like, I was so taken with it, trying to figure out, okay, so did he used to have horns and they were lopped off, and that's why he's got the scarring, but he's kind of covering it up. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely a character where I wish that the film could have spent a bit more time unpacking exactly what his story is, because it's very much framed in the perspective of, okay, let me give you some sage advice, but also I'm not going to really tell you much about myself.
Yeah, he was so fascinating to me, and I read a really good essay on this movie by Ten Backy, who I think was just on talking about Sleepaway Camp.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, about how there's a really clear trans allegory in this movie, and
Right,
with his horns, that's top surgery, and obviously later on when we see the ice scene, that's bottom surgery, and like, you know, it's a really good article on Slay Away that I recommend everybody read, because it's a really good read on the film. But I was like, oh, that's brilliant, with that being top surgery with his horns being removed.
Well, and actually, even, I mean, I know this is like later, and we'll talk about it more in depth later, but because the whole thing is when a mermaid loses their tail, they also lose their voice. And so if we're reading that as a trans allegory, I actually, quote unquote, like that as saying, yeah, once you come out as trans, or once you start transitioning, you do lose your voice in society, because society stops caring about you.
Exactly.
Oh shit.
I like in the sense that, like, that to me is like, yes, but like, I don't like that, you know?
Right. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. I'm fascinated by the number of trans readings that address mermaids in general. Like, I didn't realize that Ariel, like the Hans Christian Andersen / Disney version, was considered a kind of trans hero or like allegory. And it's one of those things where you're like, oh, when you actually have to start digging into text, you realize there's a multiplicity of readings, and people do appropriate figures. And I love the idea of people saying, oh, that Disney movie that you love so much, yeah, that's a fucking trans allegory. Ariel is ours. I'm like, cool. Fucking fascinating.
Yeah, I love it. And that's one of the best things to me about this movie is you can read it as a trans allegory. Like, it's really clear. It's definitely a queer allegory. It's an allegory for coming of age as a woman, you know, and there are so many different readings. And I think all of the ones that I have read are valid. I'm not going to say every reading's valid, because somebody might have some hateful shit out there that I disagree with. But the readings I've come across, I think they're valid. Yeah, I'm not to be controversial and be like, your opinion is wrong, but
no, but I've never even thought. I mean, no, because look, we are left-leaning people in the political spectrum, and so
just a little.
We look for, I'm gonna say, happier readings in films, or at least, like, you know, I never even thought, like, I mean, yeah, like, what is there, like a Nazi podcast out there who's like getting like Nazi readings out of films?
Oh fuck. Do not let us know. I don't want to know.
No, exactly. I don't want to know, but I wouldn't be surprised, unfortunately.
But okay, not Nazism specifically, but it's almost like morbidly curious, where I'm like, I kind of want to hear something like that, because I want to hear them defend whatever reading they have on whatever film they are discussing. Like, I have to figure out how their brain works to see how they're coming to this conclusion.
Jesus Christ. Can you imagine, like, oh, we're an arch conservative podcast and we're just going through queer texts, like, reclaiming them. Like, oh, maybe you go fuck yourself.
Oh my god.
Reclaiming this one for the straights.
Right. Okay, so we do then get Golden's song, and this is my favorite musical number of the film. I think there's something about the simplicity where she's just walking through this kind of frozen tableau talking about her loneliness, and it's only broken at one point where Silver actually becomes unfrozen and sees her going into the bathroom. But then when she sinks into the bathtub and the tail is out, and we really get a full-on shot of the teeth. I recognize that we've seen them earlier than this, but this feels like a kind of coming out where she's saying, my loneliness is only doing so much to hide this. This is who I truly am. Look at this tail. Look at these teeth. I'm a fucking mermaid.
Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat?
100%, right? Like, I mean, the Disney version is pacified, and I love this idea that we can get horrific, sexual, scary, but also enthralling versions for adults.
I do like the teeth. However, they look very similar to the wear Zombeaver teeth in Zombeavers.
Trace. Stop it.
I'll stop. That's my only Zombeavers reference maybe for this episode.
Maybe. No promises. All right, so at the club, Golden propositions a man, and they leave in his convertible. There's a brief moment where another man tries to stop her, and she ends up using her power. So there is this recurring idea throughout the film that men are susceptible to either the language or their songs.
Okay. I mean, I guess we were pulling from like Homer's Odyssey and the Sirens and stuff, but yeah, I guess I never put it together. There was the songs that people were kind of like almost being hypnitized by, but even though they're not really being hypnotized by it.
Yeah, that's how I took it, like a vampire glamoring someone, but it's the siren version,
Yeah, I really found that it was the most pronounced when they make their quote-unquote debut as the lure. And we see everyone uninhibited on the dance floor, like they're getting kind of sexy, rowdy, and I find the fact that we're doing it in slow motion makes it more obvious, but there are these little sort of treacles as we move throughout the film.
I actually, question for y'all, because I actually could never really get a read on always what the motives were of Golden and Silver. So, I mean, like, we know that they eat people. They seem to be very flippant about it. But, like, are they planning on eating a bunch of people? I know they're here until they go to America, but it's like, do they need to eat people to survive? Or is that just like a hobby that they have? I never knew really how they thought about the other characters except for Silver and Mietek.
I got the impression that it's something they need to survive, but they don't necessarily have to have, I need 1 or 2 victims a day to make it, but they have to consume human hearts regularly enough to keep going. And as far as motives go, I kind of see it as just 2 teenage girls just having fun, like 2 teenage girls kind of going wild, and they're like, we're going to stay here until we get bored, essentially. It's just falling in love, kind of complicated things.
It's their Rumspringa.
Yes.
I'll confess, at times I felt like there was a kind of kinship between this movie and the Valley Girl perspective that we saw in Buffy the Vampire Slayer when we covered it for the Patreon audio commentary. And I don't know. I like the idea that, they're just on vacation. They're waiting until they go to America. But until then, they'll maybe eat a few hearts, maybe break a few hearts, do a few musical numbers. Okay, so as Golden leaves with this man whose name is unknown, but he has a nice car, we see Silver. She sadly observes Mietek having sex with a woman and apparently uses some kind of psychic powers to burst a pipe. Yeah,
so she goes to this kind of like, oh shit, like this is what he's doing, and then she goes and gets her first cigarette.
Yeah, so she ends up interacting with an older club employee whose name I was unable to sort of decipher, but played by actor Iwana Belska. And yeah, she offers Silver a cigarette. She tells her how to smoke, but she also says, hey, if you want a pussy, you can get one, but it will cost you your voice. And what's interesting is that when I was doing my research for this and I was reading Sarah Fonseca's article, she makes an insinuation that this character might actually be a trans actress. But when I tried to do research, I was unable to confirm whether that's actually true. So I don't know if it's a reading of the character or the actor, or if it was just kind of like, oh, there's a fluidity here. But I thought that was interesting because we've never met this character before. We don't know what her deal is. So to say, like, hey, I've maybe been in your position, if that is in fact a trans woman, that really lends itself to a trans reading of this film.
Yeah, that's like a metatextual level almost, right? Because we don't know if the character is trans or not, but yeah, if the actor in question is, then that adds extra layers to it.
Yeah, like there might be a strategic casting to this.
Yeah, and not to bring the Little Mermaid into it too much, but this is clearly Ursula tempting Ariel, and Ursula famously was based on Divine.
Yes.
So I like the parallels between the 2 movies there. I think there's a lot more winking at the Disney film than is explicit, but I think perhaps that's them leaning into the trans allegory, but also kind of winking at the queerness that was hidden, quote unquote, in the Disney film.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, because Fonseca definitely addresses that kind of like association with Divine and the Disney film, but also associates the kind of husky voice of Kathleen Turner to this character. And I was like, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, why not just say Pat Carroll then at that point? Like,
Yeah.
actually, no. Oh, man. I mean, and not to be like, oh, I wish the movie had done this, but I would have been actually really, really okay if, this Sea Witch, get rid of Triton, and we have this, and she's, like, I don't know, like, but I guess then that would give the movie a villain, and we don't want...
Sure.
I mean, again, we can say Mietek is a villain of the film per se.
Oh, for sure. Yes.
but again, like he doesn't have insidious.
Right. He's just a shitty dude.
Yeah, he's just a shitty dude, but he's not like going out here trying to be like, I'm gonna fuck you girls over.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess that would be that why we wouldn't want a Sea Witch type character. But I didn't even put that together, so I love that you made that connection.
Yeah. If nothing else, there's a couple of supporting characters in here that I wish we could have gotten a little bit more from. And this woman, and then there's another woman later who kind of fixes up the human family in a moment of weakness where I'm just like, what is going on here? Who are you?
Is this the woman that Golden fucks?
No, this is a different one.
Okay, never mind.
Okay. So Silver attempts to entice Mietek with a bath, and she even invites him to put it in. And this is when he says that he will always consider her a fish or an animal. But again, if you're looking at it as, oh, they're able to control men with their song, she first peels off a piece of her tail to give him basically an instrument to use as a pick. Yeah. And then she begins to sing to him, and he seems to acquiesce. Like, he seems much more interested. And we get this lovely love ballad, which shifts between the bathroom to the empty club, and then culminates with an underwater BJ.
Well, in her song, she's saying, like, she'll convert if he returns her love to a life not bound up with virtue, regain my former composure, learn all your secrets anew. So she's already, I mean, again, she is the Ariel of this movie.
100%. Yeah.
But I find it interesting that, yeah, I mean, the Little Mermaid, the story is worse than the Disney movie because this mermaid endures torture.
Yep.
on the wrist. Like, she didn't even get to meet this man. She just sees him and she's like, oh yeah, I want you. And she gets her feet. Every step feels like she's stepping on knives. She can't talk. Whatever. And then they're like, oh, he's married someone else. But if you kill him first, then you'll be fine. And it's not a good message for little girls.
I mean, no versions of this tale are, right? Like, they're almost cautionary warnings.
Well, and so that's what I'm saying, though. So I'm a little surprised, not upset, but surprised that we keep the story relatively the same here. But maybe that's why, outside if we're adapting a story of two real-life sisters, maybe that's why we have two, to show the two different paths you can take.
Mm-hmm. Well, Jessica, not to put you on the spot, but I will echo what Trace just said. I saw a number of critics who actually said that they found the feminist message of this movie to be confused, because why do we have this character giving over to this man, not killing him, allowing herself to more or less die? And I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like that's inherently part of the message. Like,
yeah, I think there is sometimes folly in seeking catharsis in every character.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I'm guilty of it myself, so I'm not going to say, how dare you, because God knows it feels good to watch shitty men get what's coming to them.
Right.
But I didn't feel like it was confused, because I don't feel like there is a clear point A to point B feminist message here so much as it is a portrait of how confusing and how complex growing up is, how complex puberty is,
right?
Coming into your first experiences with sex, with love. There's no good way to do it for the first time. There's no good way to make it out of puberty unscathed. And I think this was more about how difficult it is and how easy it is to get hurt and let other people hurt you. I shouldn't even say that, because that makes it seem like the onus is on the victim rather than the people who are perpetrating it against them.
Right.
But how easy it is to be taken advantage of, how easy it is to...
It's like, let love sway you, right?
Yeah. So I don't think it's a confusing message. I think it's the message is how confusing it is and how hard it is.
Yeah, I like you saying it's more of a portrait of this phase of your life. And also, I mean, again, I'm going to go back to the end of the movie, but it's like, it is Silver's choice to not kill this man.
Right.
Because she loves him, or she thinks she loves him. You can view it either way you want to. And I find it interesting because I think, Joe, I feel like we've watched a lot of movies recently where characters have chosen not to enact revenge or avenge anything.
I was just thinking that. Yeah.
I know. And
I tried not to say the name of that movie because that's what I was thinking.
It's so front of mind, right?
But there was another movie too on top of that other movie. But again, to me, it's like it's interesting when we're like, this movie is giving us this message that this is okay, and I view it less as, no, it's not saying it's okay, but it's more so that people do this. People sacrifice parts of themselves or their entire being out of love. And yes, we on the outside can look at this and be like, wow, you're a stupid teenager. This guy doesn't give a shit about you. Why don't you kill him? But she's also young and naive, and she truly does love him, even though he doesn't reciprocate it. So she doesn't want to hurt him. And yes, I can see where you're like, yeah, that's a bad message because she should kill him and girls should have more confidence in themselves. But at the same time, it's not like this hasn't happened before. I mean, not with suicide. Well, actually, probably with suicide. But with someone like choosing to be the quote-unquote bigger person?
Yeah. I mean, I think the big thing for me here is that this is a teenage girl, right? Like, she is naive, she is idealistic, and we are confronted with a different perspective in her sister. So it's not as though she's the only female perspective that we have. But I also think taking that step back, we have to stop asking movies to give us exactly what we want and then saying, oh, you didn't give it to me, and therefore I don't think this is a good message. It's like, this is a realistic portrayal. We have all leapt head first into relationships where the person didn't have our best interest in mind. She is trusting her heart, and we can all see Mietek is a piece of shit. He's going to hurt you. Golden fucking tells her, but she has to go on this journey because she is in love. And for a YA character, for a teenage character, and also just for the purposes of this film, like, that is what we're getting. You either accept it or you don't, but I don't think that confuses the feminist message. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, there are some movies where the lack of catharsis is the message, and I think there is criticism, good criticism there. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But this is not the message. This is a portrait of what happens. It is not saying it's a good thing that this happens. Yeah, it's not saying it's a good thing. It's saying this happens. God knows I sacrifice myself for far too many shitty partners. This is exactly what happens. And that's the tragedy of what happens to her. We're supposed to...
I was literally just about to say, this character is a tragedy because we can anticipate what's going to happen, and she unfortunately doesn't see it. Yeah.
Well, but even when she does, even when she knows she is going to turn to Seafoam, she's like, well, let me get one more hug in first.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I agree with everything y'all are saying.
Okay, so one of the interesting things, and again, like, if we're thinking about the feminist messaging of this movie, after this love ballad where we have seen Mietek and Silver sort of sing their heart and I guess more or less make a decision that they're going to try to go for it, they arrive at the club and the men just immediately start making fun of him.
Yes.
And you're just like, dudes are shitty. Like, this is why you don't trust men.
Well, and if we're going into a trans allegory here, right? Because one of the things they say is that they're like, oh, next thing you know, you'll start growing a tail. And it's like, okay, what is the real life version of that, right? Like, next thing you know, you're going to be like turning queer on us or something.
Ooh, so scary. Oh my God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And then, of course, the real threat arrives when Golden shows up and she's still got fucking blood on her mouth because she ate that dude in the convertible. Nobody even notices. It's like, okay, where's the real problem here?
Another way that Golden is just amazing. She's like, it was a cow. And then she just like smirks at her and like walks away.
Just walks away. Confront me on it. Challenge me. No, I said it's a cow. What are you going to do?
See, and that calls to mind like Snow White to me, right? Where the huntsman gets a pig's heart instead of Snow White's heart. There's more to that. I just thought that.
That's fine. You know what? That seemed like enough for me. So we then see the girls rock out in their greenlit solo number as The Lure. And as I mentioned, this is really serving to get the crowd all riled up. And there is a woman who is watching this show, but she seems particularly disinterested. So she is played by Katernza Herman, and she will later be revealed to be a police officer, but we'll get to her in a moment. After the number, Golden approaches Triton at the bar, and he mentions that they're family. He understands her situation. He invites her to come and sing with him if she ever wants to leave the club. And he also lays out the doom and gloom very clearly. If Silver is to fall in love with a human and he marries someone else, she will turn to sea foam.
Yeah. I will say that previous number, the punk number, is my second favorite one in the film. I just love their outfits.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, though, really, Triton exists really kind of solely as an exposition machine, right?
I did see in a couple of readings that there is this kind of underlying current about trying to appease your parents. So obviously we have a found family in Chrysia and the drummer and Mietek. And then we've also got Triton, who claims to be like, hey, I'm part of your family. I know what you're coming from. I had the same experience. And I think it's interesting that if this is, in fact, a coming-of-age narrative, it's like, well, to what do we owe our parents or our family? Do we try to make them happy? Do we try to impress them? And so on.
Right.
I also think a couple of things. I think, like I mentioned earlier with Ten's reading, Triton lends himself to a trans and queer reading of the movie, but also it kind of answers a few questions about why people are not freaking out more about mermaids, because we learn that sea creatures live among humans and they're known to be sea creatures. So that kind of, I like that they just drop us into this world. Yeah, it normalizes it and it kind of answers a question that might have been lingering in your mind, and I like that it does it so efficiently.
Right.
That is too funny because I was just like, no, I'm fully on board. Mermaids exist. Yeah,
I was
walk
down.
Among us.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Because, I mean, again, going back to that opening scene where it's like, okay, Krisha screams, but then boom, we're here, and everyone accepts that these mermaids are here. Whatever.
Yeah, like, how did she even entice them out of the water? How did she convince them to come with them? Why is everybody so chill? Yeah, you just go with it.
Yeah, that's part of the fairy tale of the movie, is that some things are just, you don't have to explain them because you just accept them. That's another thing I love about this movie so much, is that it's not reality. It's just a universe just slightly to the left of ours that's the fairy tale world. And we don't need the standard exposition and the standard narrative formula that a lot of other movies follow, which is also really true of musicals a lot of the time.
So true. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about this militia lieutenant, shall we? Because if you were only doing a cursory, surface-level queer reading of this film, here we go. So outside of the bar, we have this woman. She introduces herself as the police, and she accuses Golden of eating the convertible man. So the women then have a kind of dance sing-off where they point finger guns at each other, and then the action moves into the car and then the bedroom, and we get some good tail sex and maybe murder?
So here's the thing. She does not get murdered because there are 2 deleted scenes on this Criterion Blu-ray.
Okay.
One of them, I think it's after the mermaids get dumped in the water by the family. And basically, like, Golden swims up and sees the policewoman at the pier, and they, like, meet up again.
Okay.
The second one is an extended ending of this movie. And literally, it is... so after Golden rips out Mietek's throat.
Right.
So in the version we watch, we see her kind of like, she stumbles, and she's, like, rubbing up against this wall before she jumps out the boat and jumps into the water. The reason she is stumbling is because this woman shoots her after seeing her eat out Mietek's throat.
Right. Okay.
And that scene of her, that shot of her shooting her is cut out of the final cut of the film.
Huh. Okay.
But so I think maybe the initial intent was to have a parallel between the 2 different kinds of love. We have quote unquote straight love and queer love between the 2 sisters and their lovers, for lack of a better term. But it is Golden's lover who turns on her and tries to actually kill her.
Huh. I don't like that as
That's
much.
probably why it was cut.
I can understand why the scene was maybe cut. I like the ambiguity of this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this sex scene with this woman,
Ooh.
when she's like reverse cowgirling her and just pulls the tail up 90 degrees, I was like, oh man, you know what you're doing.
Okay, so let me bring Fonseca back in for this because, forgive me, she's got a slightly lengthier quote here, but I thought it was really well written. So she says, Golden, whose name is not lost on those familiar with the Gold Star lesbian pejorative, indulges in an erotic encounter that is everything Silver's attempt at sex with Mietek, who is continually squeaked out by her fishiness and post-operation her Menzie-esque bleeding are not. The mermaid, in this intimidating form, seems to be better suited for sex with cis women than human cis men, who are tainted by patriarchal doctrine. The detective relishes her conquest's exoticism. She runs her tongue across the spines of the mermaid's tail, then straddles her in a way that is so efficient, perhaps more efficient than any way that two humans or merpeople alone could ever have lesbian sex.
Oh my god, so she thought what I thought. Yeah. Oh my god, I love being right.
Well, and Lepique, the other person that I was going to reference, makes the same kind of observation that it's like, this sex seems so much more sexual, so much more inviting, so much more consensual. Like, both parties are really interested in this.
Yeah.
And I don't want to say that it's like, well, queer sex is better sex, but like, these women are clearly having a better time than anything that we see from either Silver or Mietek.
Yeah. And, I mean, again, knowing now that she does not kill this policewoman, it's maybe because, yeah, she's like, yeah, I want to keep her around just to...
Pond on my tail a bit more.
Yeah. She's the lure.
Right. I mean, I did want to make an observation that the title alone is such an interesting, not colloquialism, but like a kind of funny play on words. Like, the lure insinuates that you're reeling someone in. It's a fishing term, but also the way that these women sing and the way that they attract people, it has a certain lure to it, right?
I did want to point out, because I didn't say this earlier, so while, yes, the original title for this was Daughters of Disco, and then the English title was The Lure, the Polish title is Korki Dancingu, which is Daughters of Dancing.
Okay.
Which I think the Daughters of Disco especially I like, because it sounds so much like Daughters of Darkness.
Daughters of Darkness!
And they're
Yes!
so similar. Like, they're both just kind of, it's just a vibe movie, like really queer, like really beautiful lesbians, just kind of...
Queer people get it.
Yes!
But I do like The Lure as a title better, if only because it's fish.
Sure. I think it's also like, if you're thinking about selling to an international audience, The Daughters of Disco doesn't tell you that this is a genre film. It doesn't really even tell you it's a musical, whereas The Lure, I don't know, there's something kind of sexy, interesting, exciting about that.
Well, I mean, I also like that, I mean, again, a lure is used to attract fish, but in this tale, the fish are the lure.
Yes, exactly.
Love it.
Okay, so we cut to Chrysia's dream, and this is very much where that sort of maternal, paternal, familial element comes into play, because she not only imagines that she herself has a tail, but that she is breastfeeding the sisters. I think this is really, like, striking.
She does not like that, though. She wakes up and does not like that.
Yeah. It's interesting to me that she wakes up and immediately wants to initiate this sort of blando heterosexual sex with her husband, the drummer.
But that's, do you think this is like a moment of, I mean, queer panic for her?
Kinda.
I didn't read it as her waking up. I thought they were in the middle, and that's what she was fantasizing about that in order to be able to enjoy sex with her awful drummer husband.
Oh, wow. Okay, that definitely gives it some recontextualization.
No, you're right, but again, like, it's thing, because after this, she displays a lot of animosity towards the mermaids. So,
for sure.
And so that's where my queer panic was coming in. Like, does she not like that she is fantasizing about this? Like, does she view them as too tempting, and she doesn't want that?
That's how I read it. Like, she's fantasizing about them, but she's also repelled by them, and definitely a queer panic instance. Yeah.
See, again, like, I mean, there are hints of all of this here. I wish it was like more screen time was spent on this. But again, I guess you could make the argument that Chrissia isn't the main character, so it doesn't really matter.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I think the telling feature is when she accuses her husband of, like, why do your fingers smell like fish?
Yeah.
And there's a joke in there where he says, oh, well, I was eating herring and I touched it with my hands. But the other obvious joke is that she's an older woman who is threatened by the sexual availability of these younger women. Like, oh, have you been diddling the girls?
Yeah. Actually, and that's a good angle to tell the story from too, right? A woman who is aging out of her beauty, and is this feeling more? Oh, see, yeah, that's something that I would like to talk about too.
Yes.
Yeah, because I did see a couple of readings, especially those that were a little bit more on the fence about the feminist messaging, talking about how Chrissia is this figure who has a certain amount of power and authority in the burlesque club, which is, at the end of the day, a patriarchal space, right? Like, her power is actually very fleeting. It's kind of, she's like a figurehead because the floor manager and this other dude that they're introduced to later has the real power. But she ends up lording it over these girls, and it's not super nefarious, but she's clearly threatened when the lure, as in the two girls and their performance, takes off in ways that her family's performance never has. Like, the club was never this populated before.
Right.
Yeah, I really like that once we get past the title card, we open on a really extreme close-up of her face.
Yeah.
Like, we take in her features, and, this is not me being derogatory, but we take in her wrinkles, we see her age, and there's a similar close-up when she's playing backup singer to them, where the roles are reversed, and it's such a, not an all about Eve thing, but there's definitely the younger women encroaching on the older woman's time, and, how long are women allowed to be sexy and appealing, that's wrapped up in all of this.
See, and that's maybe, again, too much for this movie to dive into. But if she was the protagonist, you could do that.
Yeah. Okay, so she stops sex, and then we have Silver arriving home, and Golden tells her that she's worried about her, and then the drummer gets a kind of amusing solo number where he, like, air drums, and everybody's into it except for Mietek, who's just like, oh my god, Dad, stop.
This, when talking about horror musicals, we don't have a ton of them. Rocky Horror always springs to mind. But this actually does seem like, both in the way it looks, because it looks kind of cheap, because he's just standing there in the corner with a spotlight on him.
Right.
It reminds me of a scene, like, right out of Repo the Genetic Opera.
Yes, which you and I actually both really like.
Yeah, no, I like it. I mean, it's
messy.
Sometimes really good, and it sometimes looks really cheap.
Right. Yep. So then the group then watch a news report about Convertible Guy's murder, and Chrissia starts side-eyeing the girls. Like, oh, shit, who have we let into the house? Yeah. Suddenly I'm suspicious. So I will say there feels like there's a turning point in this movie where things seem to be chugging along at a reasonable pace. Everything narratively seems to be making sense. This, to me, is a bit of a tipping point where things start to become a little bit more dreamlike, surreal, confusing. Things don't quite entirely make sense anymore. And you either go with it or you don't.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. And you're talking about, like, just the term when, like, oh, we're just going to kill them and leave them for dead?
more or less, yeah. So we do get a cat fight between the sisters after Silver complains that, they never get to do anything and they never see any of the money from their club act. I do enjoy the kind of cat-mermaid fight that the two of them have. I almost wish it had gone on a little bit longer, but it feels like it's not the point.
Okay, so when they're making up, they say this, I'm gonna say it's like a mermaid nursery rhyme that they would tell each other as children. I just want to, let me just read this because I'm curious about why it says this. So we get 1 jellyfish, 2 jellyfishes. I want to grow up and get all my wishes. 3 jellyfishes, 4 jelly beanses. We want the plankton scrubbing our fins. I'm sure this rhymes better in Polish. 5 jellyfishies, 6 jellyfishoos, wanna walk on the water in my high-heeled shoes. 7 jellyfishes, 8 jelly babies, wanna drown in the water and stay dead for ages. 9 jellyfishoos, 10 jellyfishes, give me a boyfriend who isn't amphibious. Why would a mermaid nursery rhyme end with a desire to not have a boyfriend who was like them? Well, I guess amphibious isn't like them anyway. Maybe. Right. Oh my god, maybe amphibians are like the race, the species that mermaids are racist against.
Oh my god.
I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. I just didn't know why that nursery rhyme ended with that. Like, okay.
Well, even in the middle of it, when they talk about I want to walk on the water in my high-heeled shoes, again, they're wanting not to be mermaids. So it's all about feminine beauty and feminine wiles, and I will say I'm with you on it getting more surreal and less understandable. It's I still really enjoy it, and I like the most confusing scene, which I think is the Fiona Apple video scene. But it's confusing though, and I'm not sure. It's a movie that every time I watch it, I'm like, I have to rewatch this to get more of it. Yeah.
I gotta parse this out a little.
Yes, yeah.
It's always really funny watching any serial film. I even think of a David Lynch film, because it's where I'm like, okay, at what point in the film do I lose track of what's going on?
Where did I lose the
next
plot?
time I watch it, I'm gonna remember that point, and when that point happens, I'm gonna really pay attention this time.
Really focus, like strain my eyes. What the fuck is going on right now? I look at this as, to me, it's again emblematic of what young people do, right? They have a certain idea of what growing up means, what being sexually liberated means, and it often has to do with things that you are not at the moment, right? So they have fins, they want legs. They don't have men, they want men who are not like them. They don't want mermen. They don't want a Triton. They want a fucking Mietek. And in some ways, this almost seems like their grounding mechanism. This is me totally spitballing.
Go ahead.
But it seems like a way for them to sort of get back on the same page with each other. Like, no, these are our shared aspirations. We come from the same kin. We want the same things. Why are we fighting? Oops, we've both been punched in the face by the drummer and we're knocked out.
Oh, it is really funny, though, when he just walks in and punches them.
My biggest question about this scene is, why does everyone act like they're dead? You've only punched them in the face, and sure, like, they're laying there with their eyes open, but then they dump them in the water, which we've already seen is the way to revive them and resuscitate them. That's the whole point of the pool scene earlier in this movie.
Yeah,
this family is full of bozos, is what I'm saying.
Well, I turned it to they're dumb. They're very
dumb.
stupid.
So after we do this, clandestine body dump into the fucking river like we're in some kind of mob movie.
Also, why wouldn't you dump them in a place without water?
Right? Dump them in the dump.
Yeah.
Leave them in a ditch. Leave them in a landfill.
Body disposal tips, courtesy of the horror queers.
There we go. Yeah. So then they go home and I think realize, oh shit, we think we've murdered these two girls. And they just go in an absolutely violent, destructive bender where they drink heavily and bust up the entire apartment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I confess this is my least favorite number in the film, because I'm just like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't care about this. But I guess everyone's just fucked up and we're just watching them all passed out.
Yeah, I mean, I want to give the film credit for showing that they're not glib about committing murder. Like, these people think that they have killed people and they go off the deep end. It's not a simple thing for them because they are just a nightclub act. Like, they're not committing murders all the time.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, it's also not my favorite part of the film. So the girls do end up washing up ashore. They eat a couple who are making out on the beach, and this is sort of unfurling at the same time as we see the three humans are being treated with what I deduce to be IVs of booze by a character named Boski Futrope, played by Magdalena Seleka, and I could not figure out if we have ever seen Boski Futro before.
So apparently Boski Futra it translates to divine furs in English.
Okay. Because it's not like this is the only time we see this character. It's not an angel that we will never see again. This character is definitely out drinking at the wedding at the end of this film.
And I think was the stripper with the metallic bra in one of the earlier numbers. Yeah, so
yes.
I don't know why we've got a stripper nurse wedding guest character, but I'm down with it because it works for this movie.
It's very bizarre. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
as this character is administering these IVs and they are recovering, they do sing this song where they talk about, okay, now it's done. And it does reach a crescendo as the new dawn sort of shines through the windows and a new day begins. Yay.
There you go.
Okay. So that night at the club, we see these three strut in like they fucking own the place. They are back on top. And lo and behold, the girls arrive at the club too, and they confront them in the dressing room. This was not quite as satisfying as I wanted it to be, because Golden bites off one of the drummer's fingers, and then that's kind of the end of it.
Yeah, they're just like, all right, maybe it's because of the, like, by even coming back, they're showing them, hey, we have the power here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there is that iconic image where the two girls are just standing out in the rain in their trench coats looking at the club. I did, again, question the logistics of how their mermaid powers work, because I was like, you're covered in rain right now. How do you not have tails?
Y'all have seen Splash, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I always think about that scene when she's at dinner with Tom Hanks and Eugene Levy just comes up and just sprays her with a fire hose in the middle of the restaurant.
Oh my god.
And then she just tails out.
Oh my god, tails out.
Right.
Tails out. But yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But it's fine. The movie's surreal. It's a fever dream.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Okay, so we're moving on. You know, it's, hey, you tried to kill us. We bit off one of your fingers. Let's all get past this. So Golden goes to a dodgy punk bar where she ends up performing with Triton, and she absolutely kills this performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then her surrogate daddy says, yeah, you did fine, but you didn't bite the head off a bird like I did. Also, come back later when you're more rehearsed. So yeah, she and Silver get glamour photos taken with their tails out, and they're telepathically talking about how, you know, like, hey, if you fall in love with this dude, you're going to lose your voice. And Silver doesn't believe her. And then we get to the surgery scene. So I wrote in my notes that this is the equivalent of a back alley abortion. Is that too strong?
I don't think so. I mean, they would literally have her on ice.
Yeah. Like, it's very, like, wake up in a hotel with your liver gone.
Yeah.
This is some shady shit.
I love this shot, though. We get this overhead shot of both of them on the slab, and it is... Oh, it's so beautiful. And again, like, logistics, it's like, wait, how does this make any
where'd they get the
sense?
body
Like,
from? How does the
doesn't make any
legs work? Who cares? Who fucking
who cares? It's a fairy tale.
Yeah.
But again, I love how horrifying this looks. And again, we're going back into our trans allegory here. This is bottom surgery, whatever.
Right.
Yeah, this is, I mean, we have this image in our minds, right, of what it would mean for a mermaid to become human. And we have this Disney-fied version. We have the Hans Christian Andersen version. But then we get this.
The reality. Yeah, my favorite moment of this is obviously because it's a musical. We're singing throughout most of this film, and Silver is singing as the surgery begins and as they begin to cut into her abdomen, and then her voice just cuts out at a certain point when she loses the tail. And I thought it was so fucking gorgeous how Golden plays the song on the piano, and she says, you know, I sang this for you, or I did this for you. Almost like a passing of the baton, where Golden says, like, I'm here for you. I will keep singing on your behalf because you have lost your voice. And it got me in the feels.
Mm-hmm.
So after the surgery, we see Silver practicing using her new legs. So she's, you know, working that elliptical, and Mietek comes home with flowers. Ugh. Well, here's the thing. It's because you know he's only brought them home so that he can fuck her. He just wants to be like, hey, honey, I brought you flowers. Let me stick it in you. And so they start to have sex. And I do love the attention to detail that the bottom half of her is different from the top half because she has a different person's body.
Just that slight color change.
Yes.
And she's not even waiting for these scars to heal before she's trying to jump this guy's bones.
I mean, she did this because she wants to do this, right? Like, she wants them legs, she wants them fat, she wants that dick.
I mean, also, I do love that we are giving this, like, hey, this is actually a little uncomfortable to this idea of this woman who has just gotten her vagina, who is so happy about it. Because again, oh God, no, uncomfortable is not the right word, but we're providing this explicitness to it, as opposed to something like Little Mermaid, where it's like, oh no, look, she's fine.
She's totally
she
fine.
has to learn how to use this new genitalia she just got.
Everything's great right off the bat. No, it's like, hello, you're losing your virginity. It's uncomfortable, maybe even a little bit painful. Also, you just had surgery. Yeah, you're going to bleed a little bit.
Maybe give the blood time to make its way to your vagina before you start using it.
My God. So I'll bring in Lepic here, who talks about this scene, saying the sequence represents the struggles of girls structurally barred from access to proper care, while Mietek's actions mimic those of uncaring and abusive partners.
Exactly. I mean, as soon as she has to use what was probably Mietek's thought process, the proper equipment.
Mm-hmm.
Big, huge square quotes around that, because that is
Right.
not my opinion.
It's not a thing.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, once she has that, then she's good to go. That's all he cares about, is
Yes.
that she has the proper body parts that he can use for his pleasure. Not that
Mhm.
she's still healing, that she
Nope.
needs, you have to take care of your partner and make sure they're okay. No, none of that for Mietek. He just wants to do what he wants to do.
Yeah.
And is disgusted at the idea that sex involves bodily fluids. Like,
Mhm.
he wants all the advantages of having sex with a woman, or a young girl in this case, without any of the ickiness that
Right.
is going to naturally go with sex at any point, especially someone who's never had sex before.
Mhm. Yeah, this was the moment where I just thought back to all those critics who said, well, her storyline really undercuts the feminist messaging. I'm like, what fucking movie are you watching? When you see this scene, like, he is a piece of shit because he does not respect her. He is literally just looking for any hole as a goal. He does not care about her. I mean, how do you not feel for her in this moment?
Yeah. I mean, so many girls, I'm sure, have had this experience. Not just girls. So many people have had this experience where they are in love with a partner. It's their first love, and they have this really disappointing sexual experience that they had built up in their minds to be the end-all be-all, and then
Right.
it's over fast. It's painful. It doesn't feel good, and you just feel used at the end, which is how he treated her.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, how is this not... I'm not saying that's universal for every single person on the planet, but it's pretty common.
It's pretty
And
common.
I think that's a pretty strong feminist message right there.
Yeah.
I mean, it's showing truth, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like when people see truth, they don't like that.
Yes.
Oh, this made me uncomfortable. Oh, this made me think things, maybe even about myself, I do not like.
And again, like, I'm going back to this whole, like, we're watching a fairy tale thing, and things do not necessarily play out in this movie like they do in the fairy tales we're used to.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, this is very much a return to what fairy tales started out as
Yes.
as cautionary tales, as horrific accounts of blood and violence, and just the reality of life. Like, things are bloody and violent and unpleasant a lot more than people want to admit.
Yeah. This to me is where the Disney hits the Hans Christian Andersen kind of road, where you're like, oh, you wanted Disney, but what you got with Hans?
But that's why I like this movie. Okay, as I said at the beginning, like, it's not a movie I'm particularly entertained by while I'm watching it, but I'm just fascinated by this, and I'm so appreciative of the candor with which this film handles so many really, not even taboo issues, but just issues that people don't always want to talk about.
Yeah. So, after this unsuccessful sexual encounter, things do not get better. So we learned that things at work are not going to plan because Silver can't sing, and as a result, the house manager doesn't feel the need for her to come by anymore. He wants duos, and he only wants live singing. Hence my... off-color comment about Burlesque, because of course that's like a running gag in that movie. So
I will not be upstaged by some slut with mutant lungs.
exactly. Yes. They come to hear us sing, do they? Okay.
Yeah, that's something.
Just saying, Kirsten Bell is a gift in that movie.
And she is wasted in that movie.
Oh yeah. The fact that she can sing and they don't let her sing in that movie is a fucking travesty.
Yes! Why doesn't the villain of the movie have a villain number?
Yes.
Especially when the other numbers are really fucking good, so you know that Kirsten Bell would get a good number to sing.
Yeah.
Also, Burlesque was part of my wedding. I had a table for it dedicated at my reception, so.
Amazing.
Okay, yeah, so professionally, not good. Personally, Mietek has started to fuck around with a floozy sound engineer.
Floozy sound engineer?
Mm-hmm.
It's not her fault.
You know what? It's not her fault, but I'm blaming her anyway, because
Floozy.
she's a floozy. And I love that we even get this kind of kicker. Like, it's such an emotional gut punch. Like, here's just a kick to the balls as Mietek throws away the pick into the gutter. You're like,
Ooh,
oh, wow,
yeah.
he's really done with her. Okay.
I mean, he got her once, and that's all. Like, it's pump and dump. I'm done with you. You have no interest in me. I have no interest in you anymore.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There's so many other fish in the sea.
I applaud this movie's resistance at using that line of dialogue.
Maybe it's not a Polish thing, right? Okay, so hard fucking left turn. We just transition directly to the wedding. Like, I could not believe the goal of this movie to just be like, and now they're getting married. Bam!
I will say, fucking bring up Little Mermaid again.
Uh-huh.
The fact that we are on a boat
Mhm.
and there is a wedding and we do not have an army of sea creatures attacking all the people on this boat.
I need crustaceans and I need seagulls.
I need a
Stat.
starfish on the nose, and I need a bride losing her shit at all of this thing and then turning into an octopus.
Yes.
Right. Yes. Okay. I think you've already gotten that. Maybe in a different format.
You know, we're getting a live action Little Mermaid next year, and all I want to do is see a bunch of seagulls tear apart Melissa McCarthy's face.
God.
I love her, but sorry, Ursula's face.
I was going to say, let's just isolate that sound clip and use that to weaponize against you later.
Oh my god. Yeah, no, it's again, it's this time jump where it's like, wait, what's happening now?
What is going on?
The movie's like, hey, we only have 5 minutes left of our runtime, so we gotta skip a few things.
Yeah, we gotta hustle shit along because everybody's having fun. We are singing along. I did think it was gauche that we have Triton here, and he is cooking fucking herring on this boat. Sir, these are your people. What are you doing? This is cannibalism.
I mean, oh yeah, the movie never really dives into that either. But you know, maybe that's all we need. We just know that, hey, this is acceptable for them.
I mean, I guess he's still vacationing, as he says. We're just vacationing here. Don't take it so seriously.
Yeah, I always eat humans on my vacations.
Right, yes. Also, I need to point out that Mietek's hair in this sequence is fucking terrible. Like, it was kind of scraggly crimped before, but now it is like Euro trash, and I cannot stand it. Despicable. True villain status update.
And I will point out that the wedding singers
Mm-hmm.
are the Rowinska sisters.
There we go. Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I love that they get to cameo in quote-unquote their own story.
Yeah. It's not about them. It's about mermaids, though.
Right. Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, really, all we have left in the plot, really, because it's just Golden's like, all right, eat this fucker's throat out so you don't turn into sea foam.
Mm-hmm. Triton says the same thing, and Silver's like, okay, I'm gonna go. And we get, I think, this really restrained moment where we really get to just wait and see, is she going to do it? We see the fangs out, they're slow dancing. Will she bite him or not? And ultimately she doesn't. The sun comes up and she turns into foam. And I love that Mietek's response is basically, ew, I'm covered in what? Ew.
So that's the thing, right? Like, I can make so many excuses and be like, he's just a guy. Like, I mean, like, he's just a random girl. Like, I mean, like, whatever. That reaction,
Right?
made me so fucking angry to the point that whatever, like, she chooses to throw it out, like, whatever. I would have, like, rip him apart.
Oh,
rip
yes.
his face off.
Yeah.
I don't care. Ugh.
Yeah, she was never a person to him. And
No.
just that he's like, ew, I have soap on me, you know?
Uh-huh. Oh, it's my wedding day. I'm wet now.
But I will say, Mazurik's performance, like, the eye acting, because you can see her make the decision not to kill him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so sad. It's so, again, tragic, like we've already said. It's just, I love the moment, even though I don't like what happens, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But man, watching his throat get ripped out, it's so good.
Oh, it's incredibly satisfying. You just see Golden run up and just jump on him and rip out his throat. You're like, yes, this is what I've been waiting for the whole movie.
Right?
The true good for her moment of this film.
Well, but until she goes back into the water and she is alone. She is alone in this empty ocean. Because the last shot we have is just of empty ocean. It could have been a shot from Jaws.
I'm interested. Okay, so Jessica, I'm going to throw this over to you because I don't see this as a sad moment. You know, it's obviously very upsetting that Silver has disappeared in this way, but the fact that we're getting this as a point of view shot of Golden's experience under the water, and it's beautiful and serene and empty, like she doesn't have to deal with any of that bullshit human drama anymore. She is free, and we as a proxy point of view shot get to be free with her. So I found this ending very liberating.
I did too. Like, again, this movie is all about competing extremes. We've got the tragedy of Silver's death and the human reaction to her death, which trivializes it and makes it seem like an inconvenience rather than, you know, this cataclysm that she's lost her sister.
Fucking my deck.
Oh my god. But yeah, but I'm with you. I see that as very liberating because, you know, she's got the whole ocean open to her. She's got the majority of the planet open to her. She's being herself. She is true to who she is, living her own life away from these fucking assholes.
Yes.
You know? But no, I'm with you. And I was really shocked by that shot the first time I watched it, that we didn't have a view of her in the ocean to end it. We have just a view of the open ocean. But I'm with you. That's how I interpret it, is she has the whole world open to her now because she embraces who she is, and she's not going to give herself up for anybody else.
Okay. So that is The Lure.
That is The Lure, everybody. Thank you all for coming. Thank you, Jessica, for coming on this journey with us.
Yes, thank you. Like I said, I'm thrilled. I love this movie so much, and I'm so excited to be on the show.
Well, we're excited to have you. But, okay, well, before we announce what we're covering next week, Jessica, please tell everyone, where can they find you on social media?
You can find me on Twitter at We Who Walk Here. I always share my writing, my podcast appearances, my cosplay pictures, everything. So
Promote that fucking cosplay because you are A+.
Oh my god, thank you so much. Yes, so follow me on Twitter at We Who Walk Here and come say hi and we can talk about how much we love The Lure.
Well, if you want to get in touch with us, you can reach us on Twitter and Instagram at HorrorQueers. Shoot us an email at horrorqueers@gmail.com. Find us on Letterboxd to keep track of all the films we've covered. Go to our YouTube channel to check out interviews with various horror filmmakers, as well as our monthly hangouts where we talk about hot button issues with some of our journalistic peers. And if you want to chat with other listeners, please join our Facebook HorrorQueers group. If you want to show me and Joe some love that is not financial, please go rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify.
I'll take it. Yeah.
Reviews are wonderful. We love them. And if you want even more content, please support the show by becoming a patron at patreon.com/horrorqueers. This month we've got episodes on our favorite horror movie sequences and non-horror movies, the social media slasher movies Sissy, the horror prequel double feature you didn't know you needed in Ty West Pearl and Orphan First Kill, and an audio commentary on Wes Craven Presents Wishmaster, just in time for its 25th anniversary.
Yeah, put that Wes Craven in your mouth. Come on.
But didn't you know Wes Craven directed Wishmaster? It says so in the box.
Oh my god. IMDb trivia.
I know. Joe.
Yes.
What are we talking about next week?
Oh my god, Trace. It's been 4 fucking years. I have talked about this movie so much, but we waited for the 35th anniversary to talk about Hellraiser.
Finally!
Oh my god.
Y'all heard us talk about Hellraiser 4, then you heard us talk about Hellraiser 3, and now we're talking about not Hellraiser 2,
not Hellraiser
but Hellraiser!
2. Yeah!
The OG.
It's all about Julia Cotton. People, get on board. It's not about the Cenobites.
It's not about the Cenobites. They have 8 minutes of screen time in this movie. So, but as all of you know, this is Joe's
It's
movie.
my baby.
So please come and listen to him wax poetic about that. But until next week, we can cross out the lure.
Indeed. And cross out horror queers.
Atlas Avenue, a long stretch of road that encompasses everything the city of Kennett Heights has to offer. Neon lights, traffic, crime, the hustle and bustle of everyday life, and the craziest of characters. My office was above it all. My name is James Locke, and I'm a PI.
Hello, Mr. J. How the hell you doing today?
Good, Edith. Nearly every year I have a new case. New people to meet, new clues to discover, and new problems to solve. But I do it the old-fashioned way. No technology. Nothing post-1950. Hell, I don't even listen to podcasts, but you should. Atlas Avenue Beat is a spoof of the film noir genre with goofy characters, tons of wordplay, and non-stop raunchy humor. There's also 3 whole seasons out right now with more on the way. Just search for Atlas Avenue Beat wherever you listen to podcasts or visit us online at bloody.fm.
Hello, I'm Shelby Scott, the host of Scare You to Sleep, a podcast where I tell you spooky bedtime stories full of creepy sound effects and music that is soothing yet unsettling to help immerse you into a world of horror. This is a show for those of us who have realized horror can be a strange but relaxing escape from reality. Speaking of escapes, sometimes I lead you through guided nightmares, like a guided meditation, but instead of flowery meadows, I take you on a journey through your own personal nightmare. So come get lost in the terror with me. Listen to Scare You to Sleep wherever you listen to podcasts, or find us online at bloody.fm. Sweet screams.